Welcome. I am Dr. Patrice Berry, licensed psychologist, and today we are going to take a look at the Derrick Jackson interview. This was a phenomenal podcast interview. She was a guest on Dear Future Wifey. I had never heard this podcast. I had never seen this before. And really, I think she did a really good job presenting herself. I think the host overall did a great job just making her feel comfortable and creating a safe space for her to talk about some very difficult topics. There are some trigger warnings that, and in the beginning of the first episode, there was a bit of a warning because she does talk about some of her own trauma and some things that she's went through. And to anyone that's watching, this really truly was a very interesting podcast, and we are gonna hop right in. So first, for a background, if anybody hasn't heard of this, so I will show this one because this was when I first heard of her, was when she did this interview with her then husband, Derrick Jackson. And her husband was going on social media and he was giving guys advice. But then it turned out that there were a bunch of mistresses and there was all of this other stuff going on. And this was the first time that I had heard of her. And a lot of people gave her a lot of hate online because of how she looked during that interview. And she goes into that on part two. And yes, Sarah, I agree. It is so hard to find safe spaces. And I wouldn't have talked about this if she had went on and if it was a horrific interview. Overall, I wouldn't have talked about it. I really like the fact that it sounds like she is healing and she has went on her own journey. She is doing her work. And she talked about what she could have done different, or the mistakes that she made within her marriage, within their relationship. And so it wasn't a smear campaign. So a smear campaign is when somebody that's hurt in a relationship, they go on, normally narcissists do it, but they go on to try to make the other person look bad. And she just, to me, she gave the facts of what happened. The host bleeped out because she shared a few names of some actual people that are alleged mistresses. And so yes, like she really has done her work. And so we're just going to play a few clips from this. The full videos are linked down in the description. Once again, Dear Future Wife podcast, that was where Derrick Jackson was interviewed. So this is where she goes into a little bit of her history of childhood trauma and some of the roots of her fears of rejection and abandonment. And there might be an ad. So there were a ton of ads all through this. There were a ton of ads. So as I'm playing some of this, ads might pop up, and yeah.
Years. Probably not so much as a child, but when I'm looking back on why that is, it stems back to a root of like rejection and abandonment that I had. And so as I grew up into my adult life, I definitely would say it was more in that aspect. So
we think about abandonment. What do you go back on when you hear yourself say, when I think about the abandonment that I've come from? Let's unpack that.
yeah, so abandonment. With my father, I had teenage parents. My mom was 16 when she had me. My father was 18. They never really had a relationship per se. They were just supposed to be playing video games.
They were playing with other things.
Here you go. Merry Christmas, right? Because my birthday is in December, a couple days before Christmas. So
okay.
Video games, here I go, the present. And so, there's a little bit of rejection and abandonment there, right? Because I never really had parents that were a couple.
Yeah.
Right. And then in that, because of that, there was some question about whether or not I was actually my father's or not. And so then I have that, even though I wasn't even born yet to receive that per se, but that's still affecting me because I grew up and found out about that. And then there was rejection. And then just the relationship that I had with my father growing up, I felt like he just wasn't as present as he could be, or he would always not come through or follow through on his promises when he said he would do something. And so that all affected me. And then boom, he died when I was 12. And so then, I'm just left to try to figure out this thing on my own. And so there's abandonment, there's rejection there. And as I was younger, I used to be like a tomboy per se, right?
Yeah.
And that was because I wanted the affection of my father. I had two brothers at the time, and
So I'm going to pause it here. I'm going to share a few other clips. It was very heavy. So, like, she digs into some really, really deep topics. And later on, she talks about how right before she met her, but right before she met Derrick, that 3 weeks before, she went to a party, lied to her mom, said that she was going somewhere else. And she was 19. So she was 19 years old. She was in college at Tuskegee University, and she went to a party and ended up having a significant trauma. And I want to avoid the word, but basically a significant trauma that happened. And there was so much fear and kind of denial that came up with her in that moment that she didn't even go home. She actually stayed in the house where it happened. The person that allegedly did it was like still like right upstairs, still in the room. And then she ends up meeting Derrick in class about 3 weeks after that. And there was a lot of interest. He's attractive. And then she just kind of talks about avoiding that trauma and attaching onto him. And that really reminded me of trauma bonds, that in the midst of pain, sometimes you can attach on to somebody as a way to like reclaim the body. And so, or to reclaim the self. And that's where anytime somebody's went through something really significant, I always try to make sure the decisions that we're making, are we making these decisions out of a healed place? Or are we making this decision out of an unhealthy place? Because she pretty much says for 9 years after that, so they met at 19, and then for 9 years they were on again, off again. There were multiple, and so there were like she would find videos of him being intimate with other people on his phone, and that she would just go to a closet and cry, and that she wanted him to find her crying, and then she would lie and say that she was missing her dad or something, despite the fact that he was comforting her in that moment because of what she had, but like she wasn't communicating to him what she had seen. And she was so honest. She admitted that she didn't have boundaries. There weren't clear boundaries within their relationship. And I have a clip for that one later. Let me see which clip is next. So let's go on ahead and jump ahead to 31 minutes. And if y'all have questions, if you have seen the interview, I would love to hear anybody else's thoughts. If you watch it later and then want to have more of a conversation about it later, please let me know. So I think it's right around here was where I wanted to do the next clip.
but it was like, no, you cheated on your husband while we're in marriage. I'm like, no.
Okay, just for clarification. So she would pretend like she was seeing somebody else. She talked about this Fabian guy, and that she would pretend to meet up with him, and they would race cars and they would have these interactions, but she wasn't actually cheating on him. But she was trying to make him jealous, which that's a game. And that's where she admits her toxic behavior within it as well, that it wasn't all one-sided. And that's how I know that somebody is truly healing, when they look back at a relationship, when they look back at the situation, and they say, this is what I could have done different. This is how I was broken within this situation.
No, you can't use that because we weren't married at the time. So
Did you have an emotional affair with old Fabian? Did you like him?
no. No. I was dealing with other women at the time, and I was really attached to him. And then you have to think I was coming off of that rape trauma.
Yep.
And so I never dealt with, that I never talked to anybody about. And so there was a lot of turmoil that I was having. I wasn't thinking about, oh, Fabian is this guy that I'm trying to be with. I'm thinking, how am I going to get this guy back? But then at the same time, I don't want him to leave.
Lose him. Yep.
You know, but
you want him to feel the pain, but don't lose him.
Right. And it's like, what?
But then you're not even speaking up about what you saw.
Exactly. Right. So these are all the issues that I brought into the relationship. Lack of communication.
And the fact of not speaking up was the same thing that you practiced when you were sexually assaulted.
Exactly. So it just carried over. And I didn't realize the power of not speaking about the rape trauma until well after the fact. And I'm like, wow, what did I get myself into? Right? And now I'm practicing toxicity, right? I'm practicing toxic behavior and cycles with holding things in, not talking about it, and then either being passive aggressive or just super aggressive, but nothing in between. And then he has no idea what's going on because he doesn't know what I'm freaking out about.
And what you done seen,
right.
What prompted you to start looking through his phone?
I would always get like a feeling, or he would touch me different, right? So after most rape victims are very sensitive to touch. And so any sign of him touching me, any type of any different, I'm like, there has to be somebody else. There has to be.
You're
right?
talking about with a change of a touch.
With a change of a touch. There has to be, right? And so I would go snooping around because I'm a snooper. And when you seek, you shall find. That is a true biblical verse.
And we're going to talk because she made some problematic. I think I can clearly say problematic. She made some, because around this time there was a big post that went viral where she was talking about a particular, and I didn't realize it was a scripture, but she like gave the psalm that it was, and because she was pretty much cursing people, saying that like you'll be vagabonds, like she did this post, but that post came out of her pain. And it was just very interesting seeing her talking about this now from where she is versus where she was. And the other thing that it brought up besides trauma bonds was also attachment styles. And her attachment styles seemed incredibly anxious. So I don't know her. I can't diagnose. But just from where I was sitting, from listening to her talk, from listening to what was going, she had so much anxiety about him leaving. And so when they first met, I don't know that she felt that she was enough for him or that she was worthy. So I don't know that she knew that she was beautiful, or that I don't think that she felt good about herself, and that people would always kind of be like, why is he with her? That was something that she got a lot from. So she didn't talk about this, but this is Dr. Berry talking. It seems like men that do what he did, which was pretty much have like multiple affairs, and their relationship was supposed to be a closed relationship, because people that choose to have polygamous relationships, okay, but like this was supposed to be a closed marriage, that individuals that do that sometimes attach to a woman or to a person that has low self-esteem, that has low self-worth, that even when they find stuff that they won't leave, that they're not setting clear boundaries. And from where she is now, I don't think she would take what she took back then. And just a little spoiler alert for the part 2 is because the host asked her if she is interested in dating, is she dating now? And she's like, because she's still working on getting divorced. He filed irreconcilable differences and she filed adultery. And so because of their different filing, they're going to have to go to court and work that out. Let me see. I love comments. Maybe holdover from not, being good enough for her dad. Exactly. Like this constant trying to get the affection of a man and never really fully being able to receive all of that affection and love. and possibly thinking that there was something wrong with me, or if I just do this, or if I just get better, that somehow I would be worthy of that person's love. And so she never like the word. And narcissism, as we've talked about, narcissism is a spectrum. And I think dad was just more interested in the boys. I think he didn't know how to parent her as his daughter. I don't know, 'cause she didn't go into if they're half siblings, or so she didn't go into if her dad had more siblings with her mom. And I didn't research that, because sometimes that can play a role as well. If she was the child, like at 18, that he had when he was 18 years old, that kind of ended his childhood. I've sometimes seen parents distance themselves from the oldest in a way, or even thinking if there were parts of her that reminded him of her mom. Like I've seen people do things like that. So I don't know what happened with dad. Those would be some of my guesses of what might have happened, but definitely leading to a bit of an insecure attachment. And I know, like, this whole thing was so interesting, and just talking about that fear of abandonment. They dated for 9 years, and then she ended up getting pregnant and went to his mom and said, like, hey, like, like, either I'm gonna move back to, because they were living on the East Coast, I want to say. They were about to move to Atlanta, I think. And her family was out in, I want to say, Colorado. And so she was gonna go back home with his first child. And he ended up proposing. She had their first child. And then right before the wedding, so there was more infidelities alleged right before the wedding. I do want to get back to, um, and then Christina mentions how psychology is only now being accepted as something legitimate. It will take time for acceptance and understanding to take root. Yes. I truly believe that it's important for us to talk about these things from a place of wanting to understand and just from curiosity. And I really appreciated how she was definitely coming off as a survivor, and she in no way came across as a victim. And when I make that difference, so to me, because a lot of y'all came from my like coverage of court trials and things. So Alec Murdaugh, he tried to make himself a huge victim the whole time. Leticia tried to make herself a victim. We haven't even talked about Lori Vallow yet, but when we get there, like, all these people, when they're still in their toxic pattern, they they don't see their role in everything that's happening. And to me, she was coming from a much more healed place. And yes. Ooh, 3742. Let me skip ahead. And I apologize for the R word. I tried to I forgot that was in that clip. 3742. All right. All right, so let's go here. This part was fascinating to me.
No, so we had actually planned to move there prior to, because we were living in Raleigh, North Carolina at the time. We had already planned to move there, but there was so much. I had caught him with some other girls. The girl actually reached out to me, sent me their conversations and their pictures and all this stuff, and I was freaking out on him. And then we're like, okay, this has to end. So we had already planned
So
to
at
move.
this time, you
It
were
was already
27, 20?
we were early 20s. Yeah, so about 24, 25.
I feel like I'm a personal janitor for a 25-pound anarchist.
I told y'all.
But thankfully, we heard
There are a
about
lot of
Rugby
commercials in
National
this. All right.
25.
All right. So y'all lived in Raleigh around that time, moved to Atlanta.
Yeah, we moved to Atlanta, and we had already had that in the works. I had already transferred jobs. We just hadn't made the move yet. So it was just,
y'all gonna move together at first.
Right.
Even though y'all not in a committed, we're gonna use that word loosely again. Were y'all in the
we were in technically a committed relationship when we were in Raleigh, North Carolina, living together.
When y'all was making the plan to move together.
Right. When we were making a plan to move together, we were moving together like as a unit.
As a couple.
But we ended up falling out before then. And so while the plans were still on to move, I had already transferred jobs. You know, he already had whatever he had going on. And so made the move, my mom came down and she helped me drive down to Atlanta. I had my own little space. Anyway, we were still engaging sexually, even though we were off, right? And so it was in this time where there was a lineup of us. We was passing each other on the stairway in and out.
No, y'all wasn't. No, y'all was not passing
you think this is a game.
You were not passing each other on the stairway. No, y'all was.
We were passing each other on the stairway. Like, this is my shift from this time to this time. So, you know, I was a willing participant in that. And this is like, I can laugh about it now, but it's really sad, you know, to like, what space do you have to be in to accept that? And so I dealt with it already, so I could laugh about it now. And it's funny,
that's what
but it's like,
right? You look back at your old self and laugh.
I'm just like, what? You know, but yeah, no, seriously. It was, you know, I'm coming over at this time. I know such and such is going to be rolling through about, you know, an hour and a half later. And sometimes we went a little bit longer. So literally passing each other on the stairs, like out the door. All right, have fun, you know, your shift, you know. and literally. And so there was a lot of people involved at that time. We weren't in a relationship. So all the people that like committed relationships. So I was just on the rotation at the time, and I ended up getting pregnant with our first child. And it was in that I was like, okay, Danae, you got to figure out what you're.
And so she goes in because she had made some decision. She had ended three pregnancies before that, and so she decided that she was going to go full term, and then with that, because there was one clip where she just wanted him to choose her. She desperately wanted. Ooh, that's in part 2. Okay, so we will get to that one a little bit later. But once again, just going into that lack of self-worth, lack of boundaries. And now if somebody's okay with that, that is totally different. And Sarah, I agree. Some people are okay with that comfortable chaos. But honestly, I think she was holding it all in, because then she talks about that they went to premarital counseling and she just brought it all up, and they stopped premarital counseling and still got married. Like they didn't finish the counseling, but so much came up during premarital. And I think there was a part of her that was afraid of his anger. Because when she would confront him about things, sometimes he would get really upset. And I think she would get kind of, and she would avoid the conflict to kind of not wanting to make him mad. And because I'm pretty sure that they would both kind of turn on each other in the midst of that. And so and so I think now she is deciding what is best for herself. And there's a clip, I'm not sure if I have that one saved or not, but there is a clip where she just talks about how we're going to go to the one on here, where it just got to a place where she had to take care of herself or she wouldn't be here. That things really got very, very dire for her. And so we're going to do one more clip on part 1.
We got the house!
Potts handles the drive.
All right. And so if you're catching up, so Danae Jackson, so run back to the beginning, okay? Run back to the beginning and then catch up with us, Christina, okay? And so a really interesting story, but yes, run back to the beginning and then catch up with us here. For anybody that's joining live. And so, all right, let's get into this next clip.
Emails. What kind of, right? And so it was at that point where I blew up, where I was like, okay, I need to get help. I got to figure out myself. And I actually got therapy. I got 3 therapists.
You got 3? Why do you need 3?
I needed all 3. All 3 of them. I got
one of them miss something, the other one pick it up.
Exactly.
Miss something.
Yes. And I did that for about 3 months until I settled on one. And then I was with her for about 1.5 years. Yes.
So you said this was a couple of weeks before y'all said I do?
Yes.
And then after you got over that, y'all just decided to go ahead and get married at the same time. Y'all didn't change the date 2 weeks later.
Yeah, no, we did not change the date. We still got married 3 weeks later. We did it. I was pregnant actually with our son. Nobody really knew I was pregnant because I wasn't really showing that much. And I didn't tell a whole lot of people
So
I
you're
was
pregnant
pregnant.
with the second child?
Yes, our son. And so, yeah.
And so now you get pregnant. It's a trip. You're getting pregnant in trauma. It's like,
and just how she shared, yes, so she said she had and she clarified later that what she did was she interviewed three therapists, and then eventually she settled on one. So in the meeting with the three at first, she was trying to figure out who is the best fit for her. And then she did narrow it down to just one therapist that she ended up working with. But I was like, 3 therapists? But I was thinking like one therapist. And I think at this point, she still hadn't addressed the trauma that happened right before their relationship in college. I don't think at this point she still hasn't really addressed that trauma. And that is a big root. And so sometimes, but I think it was a part of her that didn't want to accept or say that it happened, which is incredibly common. And so there was a part of her that was still distancing it, like getting. I can't with y'all. Sometimes you have to meet a few different people to figure out if you're using your insurance. You have to be careful because you got to make sure everybody gets paid. But I think she was just trying to find the right fit for her. So she checked out three different therapists, and then eventually found one that she ended up working with. All right. So now to part 2, where she kind of talks about their marriage, and that there was all of this. She was aware of the infidelity before marriage, and then that it continued to happen even within the marriage, and that she just desperately wanted him to choose her. And so we are going to go to that clip. Share this tab. There we go. And I apologize for any commercials. Y'all know YouTube's people like putting commercials on stuff. And so, all right. And once again, I have the full videos down in the description.
That is a low point to be. And I'm tearing up a little bit because I hate that I even got to a point where that was a thing, but that it was just that. And so I knew several other women's bodies better than I knew my own. I completely lost myself. I became a shell of myself. I tried to imitate their hair, their actions, even sexual things that I had seen him doing with them. I tried to recreate that in our life when we were engaged, and none of it amounted to anything. And so I just became more like depressed, more withdrawn, because it's like, I can't share this with him because then he's going to leave, right? Because I'm still operating off of that abandonment and all of that. And so it's so crushing. And there's not really words to put like what happens to you when you see that. And you don't just see it one time, but you see it multiple times, and you see it multiple times over years, what that does. And then you compound onto that rape trauma. You compound onto that daddy issue. Like, there's no way for anybody to survive that mentally and emotionally without God like intervening in some way to literally pluck that out. It's so crushing. There's no breath in my body.
What brought you back? 8 months you were away. You're restoring yourself now.
So she left before everything went. So this was before the public was aware of everything that had happened. They've been married for years, and she had because he was actually staying in a condo. So they had a condo and a 9,000 square foot house, and it was her and her 2 kids all by herself in the huge house with that. But he was staying over in the condo and doing over, supposedly, allegedly, that's what was happening over there. And she was in the house alone. And let's just keep listening to that for a little bit.
Not only physically, because you're malnutrition at this time, you're about to lose your mind. You got 3 therapists. You're now participating in your mother's Bible study groups and all that. So you've been edified on the spiritual level. 8 months away, he's coming in to see you and the kids. What made you say, I'm going to go back and I'm about to recommit to this marriage?
I gave him a list of 13 things that I needed to recommit. I had fasted and prayed on it, and I'm like, Lord, if I go back, there's some things that I need. I gave him a list of 13 things that absolutely needed to happen.
Do you remember some of the things on that list?
Yes, the first thing was that we needed to have spiritual, counsel. Like, we had to engage for a minimum of 6 months. He had to schedule time for me and the children within his work schedule. And he had to create the schedule, not me create it for him.
Fair enough.
Okay, he had to change his numbers. Because he had 2 phones at the time. He had to change both of those numbers.
And of course, so he changed the numbers, but the other people supposedly it didn't stop. So even after those 13 things and all of that, it still didn't stop. Everything continued. And so I just thought this was a great interview and a great explanation and showing of just how somebody can come through. And Sarah, I agree. He really didn't have respect for her. But then also, I think she wasn't respecting her. And I don't blame her. Does that make sense? And that's where, if she was my client, I would be empowering her to make some serious decisions, because either it's okay, either you're going to be okay with this and stay, and it's going to have a negative impact on your mental health, or you're going to make other decisions. And that she had to come to that for herself. She talks later in this interview that how even so during that one, let me show this again, because this was where she ended up getting some hate online, so a lot of negative feedback about how she looked. She explained that this was a hat. So in this interview, so the world found out that he was not who he was professing to be, and that he had all of these issues because he had built his brand. So he was a YouTuber. So Derrick Jackson, he was a YouTuber, and like Instagram, he was a social media influencer that was giving advice to women about men. It's not funny, but what? Like him? Like y'all are gonna him? He's the one. Okay, we're not gonna go there. So that was his brand, and then it turned out that he wasn't the good guy who he was portraying to be. And so they did a video together. And she was really quiet. She describes herself as weird, and I love weird. So I almost I love weirdos. Like I am a big weirdo. And but she was an introvert. She didn't really like being out there. A lot of people thought she had on a bonnet. So a bonnet, especially within Black culture, when you go to sleep at night, you put like a bonnet on your hair to protect your hair, especially for curly girls. And then even for people that have their hair straight, they still might wear a bonnet to extend the hairstyle. But this, she said, it was a beret. It was actually a hat. It was not a bonnet, and that she was actually pregnant during so she was pregnant with their third child during this. I think it was like 8 weeks pregnant or so. And so she ended up being able to, yes, she ended up being able to talk about it. The behavior panel probably did do an interview. He came off as I don't like using certain words, but he came off like he didn't come off well. I told y'all, my mama said, if I don't have anything nice to say, don't say. So y'all can say it. I won't say it. I won't say any of the things, but some comments might just kind of come up. So yes. And so, because I think in the midst of this, I haven't heard him really take responsibility for what he did. So supposedly this year on Mother's Day, he did this post to her about like how she just like thanking her for being a great mom and all of that. But she had been blocked on his social media at one point. And that's probably because there were probably times when she was kind of stalking his social media and like probably getting evidence for her like court stuff. Because she says on the person that cut his hair for their wedding, she thinks that he was intimate because it was somebody that he had been intimate with in the past. So she thought that there had been something between them. And the whole thing was just so messy. But like she just seems like she's come so far. Um the host did talk about the fact that he like paid to have somebody come and do her makeup and everything. And I kind of wish he didn't say that, like, because her makeup did look really good. Um, but he did just talk about he wanted to make sure that she was representing herself very well and that people weren't going to pick her apart like they did the very first time she was kind of thrown into the spotlight right along with Derrick. And so they are still married. She's working on getting the divorce. The interview was released recently. Let me see what the dates on this are. So May 24th was when episode 1 went up. And I saw it last night and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I have to get on and talk about it," because I just appreciated how she owned her part in it and the things that she has to heal, the things she has to work on, and she really looks like she is doing her work. And I could really appreciate that because and that she knows that she still has some more work to do. And for her, her faith was a big thing for her. She did have that post where she was like, so she taught on a scripture and that didn't go viral. The one that went viral was the one that was like, may your, like, it seemed like she was cursing people. Like it seemed like she was cursing the people that were like coming against them. And it did not come across very well. It did not seem to come from a very healed place. It seemed to come from a very broken place. And so I she thought so as well, that because he didn't, and so he supposedly did like send her some flowers or something, but him doing it on social media made it seem like he was trying to, because he makes his brand, I believe his living was he used to do courses and he had videos that would go viral, and so that was how he made a lot of his money. And it was just very interesting to watch. And I do hope that her sharing her journey, that it helps somebody that might be in a situation like hers or that has come out of a situation like hers, because there are people that know exactly how she was feeling. Because there was another Atlanta couple where like there was some messy mess, there was some stuff going on, and I think it was the wife. The wife like lost it, and um her and the husband are no longer here. And so that is where that is a problem. That is not okay. There are kids, because I think they had like five or six, they had a bunch of kids together, and those kids don't have parents anymore. And so I love the fact that Danae, that she seems to be doing her work. She seems to be in just a much better place. And she sells a course, helping people heal. And she says that it's in conjunction with, that she recommends people do their own therapy. She's not a therapist. She graduated from Oral Roberts with her master's in theology, I believe. And so she does, like, but I think now she found her power in the midst of this. Excuse me. I think there was a time where she probably made herself small to not bruise his ego. And so y'all know I am married, and I am thankful that like my partner isn't that I can be me. I can be big, I can be smart, I can be all of those things. And it doesn't in any way make my partner feel less than. Because she actually tutored Derrick when they were in school. Like that's how they met. Like that's how. So he asked her to tutor him, and so she is very smart. She just because he was making her come across like she was not like there was something wrong with her. And while I'm sure when she was in her passive aggressive, because she admitted that there were times she could be passive aggressive, there were times that she could kind of lose it. And but I think what would happen is she was burying down all that hurt and pain. And when it came out, it wasn't just coming out for that one incident, for that one thing that she saw. It was coming out for like everything. And she would just and so that's where when I'm working with clients or if I'm working with couples, and I don't do a lot of couples work, but I know how, but I don't like it. But if I am working with a couple, I encourage them, if something happens, let's talk about the one thing. We can't bring up the 20 other things that have nothing. Like we have to stay on track. We have to talk about the thing, because when you bring up the stuff from 20 years ago, but we were talking about like this thing just happened, but now we're talking about 20 years ago. It makes the person that is trying to communicate their message, it just makes them look like I don't know, it just makes them look bad. Like it doesn't come across in a way where the other person is listening, because then the other person just starts defending themselves and all of that. And Christina, I agree. Social media can be both a blessing and a curse. And at times, I mean, there's some interesting things that can happen. And so making sure that's why I try to create a healthy place here. But sometimes the interwebs, they don't like the healthy. Because I will still talk about the fact that like the video that has done the best on this channel, it is Dr. Lewis's testimony, which is horrible. Like it is like it's a train wreck, and I'm just pulling my hair out, and people are loving it, but like it was a mess. And so I was like, please go back and watch those other forensic psychologists that actually knew what they were talking about. Please go back and watch my review where I don't show any video, where we just talk about what happened during that. And so Sarah, I agree, people have to fight fair. And sometimes with couples and families, we do what's called rules of engagement, where we develop their rules for fighting fair. It's often hard to leave the old stuff. Cumulative, yes, that's what it is. And so, but you have to leave the or you have to start talking about the old stuff, because we can't start arguing about the dishes and now we're bringing up infidelity from 20. Like that's just like, but we were talking about the dishes, and now it's never actually about the dishes. Like it always is a deeper issue. But if you're actually trying to solve this problem, bringing up all the other stuff is not going to help. And it was a mess. And then Christina shared, focusing in therapy can be difficult, especially when we subconsciously avoid. Yeah. So, yeah. So, and I'm so glad as a therapist that I have done my own therapy, because there were times where I would have to email my therapist to be like, make sure to ask me about this. So that's a little tip. If you know that there's something that you need to bring up in therapy, but you're afraid you won't do it, give your therapist a heads up. Or like write in your notes, and pull out those notes the first thing and say, okay, these are the 3 things we need to cover today. Make sure that I talk about this thing, because that can really help people move forward. And so, do y'all have any questions for me? Any questions? Because it is Memorial Day weekend. And I am glad that I got to hop on and chat with y'all for a little bit. I'm still deciding if I'm going to do the Lori Vallow religious trauma one tomorrow. I'm not sure. Okay. So I'll figure it out. If I do it, I'll post it. I'll post it early, but I might save that for next week. Go enjoy. Yes. So my plans this weekend. So my community is having a what's the word? A Memorial Day bash. And so I'll be taking my kiddo to that tomorrow. Make sure to like, subscribe. I appreciate the engagement. I adore this community. Thank you to all of the members and within my little community. And I'm glad that we're kind of tight knit now, where I'm learning y'all's names. I am, and so Sarah, I don't like you're always here. Christina too. And I appreciate all of the engagement, because there's so much on the interwebs, and so you all could be anywhere. So I'm gonna go enjoy the rest of my holiday weekend. I have one more client a little bit later today, but I hope y'all enjoy y'all's weekend. Have a good one. Let me know if you have comments or questions down there. Bye.